The DIESOL podcast,
Developing innovation in English as a second or other language.
episode 91, 13 scary student habits.
Welcome to DIESOL. This is episode 91. We are your hosts. I'm Brent Warner.
And I'm Ishel Reyes.
Hey.
Guess
So,
what?
what?
Guess what? I'm so excited.
What are you excited about?
Transcription now recognizes my name
Yes.
and
Okay.
spells it correctly. I'm no more Michelle or
Well,
well,
hold
the
on.
other.
Let's be a little bit careful about that. It got your name right one time, which is
Oh,
great. So
hey, yeah, that's hey, it's learning.
that's a little learn, right?
It
Baby
only
steps
took
forward.
how long did it take? Probably shorter than the
90
average human.
episodes. Yeah. Yeah, right. So people are still like, how
Hey,
do you spell it? So
I was
so it did get
excited.
your name right. Saved it really so it spelled your name out right, and I looked at it, I was like, oh my God. And so then I went searching, and I was like, okay, there are a couple other ones that I still had to find, but like one step at a time. So we're happy
Okay, I'm
there.
happy.
Yeah, we'll take the win.
Yes.
Anything else going on for you?
It's Halloween month, and
Yes.
which means we're a whole like 4 degrees lower here in Texas. So every little win is a big win.
Take it.
Take it.
Yeah.
You've been up
Uh
to some stuff.
Yeah, it's been a busy couple of weeks here. But
Mhm.
I think the biggest thing that was great, I did a presentation for TESOL, so their first webinar on AI and artificial intelligence, and it was quite
Mhm.
well attended. I think there was something like 150 or more people on a Tuesday night or something like
Mhm.
that. So really good. Lots of people were interested and shared some ideas, and good conversation in the chat and everything. So I was just really happy to see that there's a lot of teachers who are kind of saying, okay, let's take a look at it. Let's start
Yeah.
embracing these things.
It's
So
kind of the thing where you cannot ignore AI.
no,
And I think this is the one where we're actually, I don't know if we're up to speed, but I think that we're actively, as you know, as an organization, TESOL is actively seeking, what guidance and kind
yeah.
of working through it. So that's great.
Yeah, and I think the teachers are really kind of recognizing that we're not talking about a fad here. We're talking about a big
Hmm.
shift. So that's
That's right.
great. All right, so I think it's time to zombie walk on over to the topic today.
Let's zombie walk. All right. So last year, Brent, we covered scary teaching practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this month, I mean, and I don't know that they've stopped, but
Oh
this
no,
month
no.
it's
That episode is so great. So 13 scary
oh,
habits that teachers need to stop, right? The best thing about that is that once we did the episode, every teacher in the world stopped doing those bad habits.
we cured
We cured
bad
it.
teaching
Yeah.
practices.
It's amazing. Just by
And
one
that
episode just talking about it, and it's like, who knew the power of communication? So I think so we decided we need to do the student version, right?
yes. And so this time we're going to talk about scary habits that students have and how to prevent them.
All right, this is a very scary episode. So all right, so 13 bad habits. We're not I want to clarify though, these are not the bad habits that are like, oh, my student threw a stapler at my head, like not
Not their
bad.
pencil
Yeah,
or
I mean, so one, like full on like behavioural issues, we are not qualified to talk about that. But I think we're trying to talk about
I
like
mean, I
helping.
have some of those behavioral issues. I throw staplers at people.
Yeah, well, and that is scary for sure. So when that stapler comes flying at you, but we're talking more about learning behaviors and those types of things. So Michelle, you have the first one.
Yeah. I think this one just is one that happens all the time to me is not correcting each other. So one of
Mm,
the things that I constantly have to introduce when I have a new group of students is the culturally that may not be appropriate, right? And they're not used to it. And this can lead to students getting used to hearing the same type of error And then unlearning it becomes more difficult because they'll say, "But I heard it this way, and
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard it that way." And it's like, trust me, trust me. No one corrected you, and you guys are all making the same mistake. So how to mitigate this? Well, I think it's encouraging your students to be open to learning from correction. And I think if it's introduced with the right activity and they can verbalize what the purpose of that correction is, then they're more likely to help each other and not feel attacked. I think that the way we give feedback and also teaching students how to correct each other is important to empower them really to do it themselves.
Yeah. And I think one way to maybe deal with that too, I have not done this, but I'm just thinking about it as we're
Mm-hmm.
talking, is maybe actually role playing, making mistakes and giving feedback, right? So you can actually sit down with the
Mm-hmm.
class and say, like, hey, this is an English lesson, but we're also going to learn how to help each other. And so then when they're kind of intentionally know that they're going to be making mistakes and then intentionally trying to get the feedback, it feels a little bit more comfortable. Plus they learn the correct polite language where it's not like you're wrong, like it's like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe try saying it this way, or say, so you can build in language lessons at the same time, but that will kind of lower the barrier to being able to talk about it and being able to share with people as well.
Right. And I think, Brent, it's easy for us to say because we're from a culture that is very open and direct about these things, but how difficult is it for someone whose first 24 years of their life, they don't correct,
Mm-hmm.
even if they're burning inside with the right answer or, so I think, again, just reminding them of the purpose that this is cultural, I think that will help, fixing that habit.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you have?
Okay, so I think that one thing that's interesting is that a lot of students that believe that, like, when they're not intrinsically motivated, that the
Mhm.
only extrinsic motivation for learning is grades, right? And it's like, well, I just have to do this because of my grades, right? Like, the grade matters. So one, I mean, that's its own whole issue. We can talk about the value of moving to an ungrading system if you want to, but also the other thing to this is that we have this kind of idea that extrinsic motivation is bad motivation, but actually a lot of it can be really well implemented. And so if students kind of start seeing that, hey, I'm not necessarily intrinsically motivated, but I can build my own extrinsic motivation to do these things, or to get through this work, there's actually a lot of ways to adjust your thinking. And so one of the I think I've talked about him in the past. Cal Newport. He's kind of like
Mhm.
a thinker in the field, and he has all these books on like how to be a successful student and how to stop using email and all sorts of great things. But he really talks about these ideas, and he's got we'll put a link to the blog post that he wrote about this many years ago. But excuse me, but he's really talking about, there are these ways that you can use your own psychology to build success for yourself. And so one of the examples that he says in there is, if you choose a deep question that helps you out. So if you're like, maybe I don't really want to take a writing class, but if you find a question that's interesting to you and you say, well, what makes great writing great? And or if you're taking a science class and he says, what are the laws that explains nature's marvels? So then it becomes like a question that you want to answer, and then you're building towards figuring out what that particular zone of interest is, right? And so you can say, hey, I don't really love learning how to write, but I am interested in what makes writing great, right? And so you can kind of play around with the way that you're approaching these things, and if you help your students see those things, then they might find some other ways to build some extrinsic motivation rather than just chasing a grade.
Very cool. Yeah. You mean I need to find ways of figuring out how to be motivated to teach basic electricity?
Yeah, well, I mean, it really is
Seriously.
that,
I was
right?
like,
Yeah.
holy moly, how am I gonna get through this? But again, even as teachers, we have to do that. So
Yeah. Oh, for sure. This applies to
mhm.
us very well.
When we're
So,
assigned the
so,
course that
but
we
I think
want.
we don't normally say, "Hey, I'm going to spend 10 minutes thinking about this just to figure out a way to get myself going," and instead I'm going to just burn hours and feel like I'm, just stressed out about this whole thing. And so I think it's worth just spending that time up front and going, well, let me take different approaches to what I'm doing with this. So instead of just saying I don't like it and I'm just going to, you know barrel my way through it because I have to. So I think that's a big part. I'm going to
We
connect
have
this
another
one,
one.
Isel. Yeah, can I
Go ahead.
the next one here
Mhm.
is connected. So and it's also kind of came from some of his ideas, but um a lot of students, and I think especially post COVID, or because of COVID and through COVID, they feel like they're chronic procrastinators. And and I think the truth is that a lot of us all, students themselves, but a lot of people have trained themselves into procrastination, and they can train themselves out of it. So doing units on productivity is one way to deal with this. So I have in my class, we actually do a full on unit on like study habits and motivation and those types of things, but our students actually get a lot of value. So of course, not every student is going to get value out of this, but I do have students who are like, oh, I just procrastinated, I put things off, I didn't really do these things. And then we would do some activities through learning about study habits and about how to be more successful as a student. And one of those ones that we did was we would get a journal of weekly activities. So it was like an hourly journal, all 7 days, put on a spreadsheet, and students could then, for every hour of the day, they would just write in what they did during that hour, right? So just kind of keeping it not perfectly, but they would kind of follow along with it and say, and set their alarms on their phones. You can set 100 alarms on your phone. So I'd say, hey, set it to go off every 3 hours. Just fill in the last three things that you did during those 3 hours. It could be playing video games, it could be eating with your family, it could be whatever it is, right? And then that we would break those down afterwards, and they would look at them and say, okay, how much time was spent on schoolwork, how much time was spent on work, my job, how much time was spent with my family, how much time was spent with my friends, how much time was spent just wasting time, playing, wasting time, as however they want to define it for themselves. And a lot of the students really have taken value out of it, and they go, oh, I didn't realize that I was doing this so much. I didn't notice that my time on my phone was so high, or whatever else it is. And so not every student does this successfully, but I think a lot the students that it can help out, they really kind of go, oh, okay, I'm going to figure out better ways to use my time. So that was one solution. And then the other part is, again, kind of going back to Cal Newport, he makes a suggestion, says every time you have a meeting, a class, whatever it is, overschedule your calendar by 20 to 25%. And he said 20%, but I'm going to say 25 because time is easier. 25%. um
You throw in that the 5% for cultures that are whose time is a little more flexible.
yeah, but the idea is like, hey, if you're gonna have an hour long class, or sorry, if you're gonna have an hour long meeting, you put on a chaser right after it for 15 minutes, because one, you might want to talk to that person a little bit longer, and two, you might need transition time to get yourself prepared for the next thing or whatever else it is. But people don't do that. They go back to back to back, right? Or they think they don't have anything to do, so if they have a 2 hour class and this goes from 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock, for example, if they set up in their schedule and in their mind, no, it goes until 11:20, and then every day when class finishes, they go, okay, well, I'm still going to do 20 more minutes of work on this class, whether that be review, taking, cleaning up your notes, checking the information, going and talking to the teacher, all those types of things. They can be a lot of work in helping you stop your procrastination, because you've already set the time in to get started on the next part of the work.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to go in with the whole um, fact that this is a new culture for many of our students.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of planning things out, for some of our students coming from overseas, studying in the United States may have been their last chance at something because they weren't able to do it back home.
Mm-hmm.
And so having, again, this, it's sort of like a safety net to help them at the university when they transition or wherever it is. It's just life skills, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, here's another one. And this one is thinking that there's a tried and true grammar rule to solve it all. And a lot of students are used to, having studied grammar overseas, and they've memorized and they know this can only be used with this and this verb. And they know all of the jargon. But then they arrive here, and the reality is that we're not using it that way. Native speakers, maybe your grammar teachers are, but that doesn't happen. Most of the time, you're going to be speaking informally, and so you
Mm-hmm.
need to be able to have those transactions sound natural. So I think to mitigate this or help reduce that or unlearn or maybe be open minded is to share formal and informal language pieces with the target uh, grammar structure used or language used in many contexts so that students can start seeing the complexity of language and
Mm-hmm.
also learning to appreciate that there is so much more to fluency than a grammar paradigm.
Yeah. You know, when you said this, I was thinking that you were talking about like the different ways to express a same idea, and when sometimes I'll get students and they're like in class, someone says it and they're like, well, can I also say it this way? And I'll be like, yeah, you can say it that way. And then inevitably there's like some students that like their eyes go wide and they're like, wait, you can say the same thing in different ways. And it's like, they're not linguists, and so they're like, even though they're studying another language, they're not
Right.
linguists, and so they've never really thought about the idea that like, oh, there's lots of different ways even in your own language to express one thing. And so that can be a big eye opener to students when you start saying like, yes, it's okay to say things in other ways, and they go, well, which one's the right one? You go, there's not a right one. There's the one that you
Mm-hmm.
choose to use, amongst these things. And so you have to be, so it helps them to become a little bit more flexible in their thinking, I think, too.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so my next one is too much passive learning.
Oh
uh
man.
yeah. So it's like, I think we're actually kind of guilty of this partly because of being a YouTube generation too, right? Where it's like, I'm just gonna sit back and
Mhm.
watch this thing and then I'll learn about it. And it's like, did you really learn it? Right. And so I mean, all students forever have done this, but sitting in the
Mhm.
back of the class and you're not speaking up, right? And so if you're in a program like mine, like my adult ESL program, I get a lot of students that just kind of never really get better, like they're like, okay, well, just kind of hanging out, just kind of making it work, and it's a bummer because it's like, well, you could be working on all this stuff and they just kind of sit in the class and don't participate. And I get that they might be shy, of course, like I'm a shy person, but my solution for this for myself in language study was I need to be proactive, right? Even though that's not really my fundamental personality. I was like, okay, well, I want to sit in the back, but I know that I'll participate. I'm going to sit in the front of the class, right? Or in the first front, or two or three. I never sit in the very front, but but I'll sit in the second row or the third row or something like that. And then also I would set a goal for myself as a student to say, okay, I'm going to try and speak up 3 times during class if the teacher's calling on people, or I'm going to make sure that I talk to, like, try and get into a study group with some of the people who seem to be active, right? Like, really, you have to be that proactive learner and not just think that things are going to magically fall into your brain just by sitting in the room.
And I think this reminded me of when I was an undergrad student and I was taking chemistry. Was it chemistry or biology? No, it was chemistry with a lab. And I remember we had about 300 people in the regular lecture. And I remember thinking, holy crap, how am I going to learn? And like, you can't really interact in that class. But
Mm-hmm.
there was this girl who later became one of my best friends. Um, this girl who kept asking all these really good questions. And she sat sort of in like the T zone, the T zone of a lecture hall where you look
Uh-huh.
kind of like down the center. She sat in that center um, area. So I said, I'm going to sit next to her. And I may not ask, but I can ask her and I know she'll have the answers. And that made it safer because I knew she was asking questions.
Mm.
And I did. We became friends, and she helped me through a lot of the chemistry problems I didn't understand, etc. So now I tell my students, okay, if you're too shy, or if you're in one of those large halls, find a person who's asking lots of questions in class,
Mm.
because then the teacher will also be directing the talking in that direction. So you'll get a lot more face time, and
Yeah,
that's important.
absolutely. That's great. Yeah, love it.
Okay, so that takes me into my next scary habit, and that is, again, I think it's tied to culture, not asking questions out of fear of being disrespectful in class.
Mm.
And it could be that, again, not wanting to challenge the teacher's authority or the perceived knowledge, authority that the teacher has because of knowledge. So encouraging students from countries where this may be a taboo, by having them write out predictable questions before they ask them really helps. I've done that with several students
Oh, that's
individually. I'll
smart.
say
Yeah.
like, here's a question you can ask, and it could be a predictable question like, Can you repeat that again?
Mm-hmm.
That's predictable. That's a safe risk, right? You're going to get an answer, and you don't have to be paying attention to the answer. You're just practicing questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then making it a class routine, and then asking students to check each other's questions for grammar, and then for different ways of asking the same thing. Because question formation is can lack of having good question formation can make it difficult for students once they go into mainstream classes. Teachers just don't understand what they're trying to ask. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of the time students will, when I have them do an activity with questions, they'll say, oh, I asked the same thing. And I'll say, I still want to hear it because you probably asked it in a different way and I want to hear it. And sure enough, I'll get like 3 or 4 ways that they asked for the same information. But once I've written it down, it's like adding to their language repertoire for questions.
Yeah, that's great. um I think that that's really really powerful and useful for the students, and so many of them think that they can't, they can't ask questions in class or whatever else it is, and it's like
Yeah.
it's a shame. And there are some teachers who are guilty of perpetuating that too, right? Like not making it easy for students to ask. But I
And if
think
you have a large class, that it's
mm-hmm,
hard. So you've got to be proactive as a teacher to identify those students who can benefit from like a. I've had sometimes on the student's desk a little post-it, and I'll say, "Here's a question, so I want you to practice tomorrow." And they'll have it ahead of time, so they don't have to let the rest of the class know, or they already have it. And then I ask them to write their own question, and so that it's kind of, still giving them some attention. But
mm-hmm.
it's going to be hard, right? It's going to be hard, and if you're tied to a curriculum that's got time constraints and you're gonna leave that out for
Yeah,
the sake
yeah,
of.
yeah. Yeah, that's great. So my next one is waiting too long to come to the teacher for help.
Yes.
This is like it's such a bad habit for
Mhm.
students, and it, again ties in with a lot of those same ideas that we're talking about. But you know I get so many emails that start with like, I'm sorry to bother you, I know you're very busy, but blah 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 blah. And
Mhm.
I'm like, no, this is my job, right? Like, you don't need to
Yeah.
apologize to ask me a question or to come, to come up with these things. And of course, yes, I'm busy and all of those things as well, right? There's work and all, etc. to do, but my priority as a teacher should be helping that student out, right? And so I get these students who come and it's like way too late, right? It's like, hey, you're coming the day before the deadline. We've been working on this essay, for example, for 4 weeks, and you're coming to me now. And it's like, you should have come. And again, this maybe ties back to the procrastination, but it's like, but I don't think it's always about procrastinating. I think it's much more about the fear of reaching out to the teacher and saying, hey, I need help from you, all those types of things. And so there's a couple parts to this. I think maybe some solutions for us as teachers, that we might be guilty of perpetuating this, right? So if during class time we talk all the time about how busy we are and how we're running from this to this, right? Students are going to pick up on that, right? And they're going to say, oh, okay, you don't have time for whatever, right? And so teachers can help solve that for the students, on a subconscious level, where they stop talking about their busyness or their inability to get things done and just say, you can just leave it and not mention those things. But you could also, one thing that I did that made this a lot easier and it reduced it a lot was I moved my office hours into the class before the class. So it was like, I'm always here 30 minutes before. I don't have anything else to do. Just come and chat with me. And so that really opened up a lot of and again, I know not everybody has the flexibility of the
Right.
classroom schedule to do that, but you could be, for example, sitting outside of the class and saying, like, I've seen teachers, sitting on the benches outside of the class and they're just kind of hanging out there waiting around, whatever. There's all sorts of different versions of ways to do this. And so one, students of course need to learn how to go out and talk, and say, like, reach out for help as early as they can, or make sure for clarification as early as they can. But also the teachers need to set up a scenario where that makes it a part of the classroom culture to do that.
Yeah. And again, we're talking about, often my students will be extremely apologetic and they'll start with, not that I'm sorry. They'll say, I know I'm bothering you, but.
Oh,
And it's like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, you're not bothering me. I want the questions. I want to know how I can help you. If I can't help you, I'll look
You're
for a way.
bothering me by phrasing it that way.
So giving them the sentence stems to, here's what seems respectful to you, but here's a way, a better way to practice asking for help.
Mm,
Simply say, I need help. When is a good time? Is
yeah.
today a good time? And gear it more toward, let's talk about that and find
Mm,
a time. If now is not the time, let's find a time.
yeah.
Um, Great. Okay. So the next one is trying when students try to take down notes on every single thing that an instructor says, even after we've told them you don't need this on in your notes. Sometimes they're just like so focused. A better strategy is to have students summarize in their own words. And again, not every group is used to doing that. They want to copy everything that's on a slide, and if it doesn't match what you're saying, they want to say, "But that's not on the slide," or they'll take a picture and then they'll want to record what you're saying. I think exposure to Cornell note taking style, if that's not already built into your curriculum, if it's not a university style class,
Hmm.
that helps to support students in synthesizing, and also students from whose cultures don't have this style of note taking or synthesizing, where they're just regurgitating, and that takes a lot of practice. If you're sometimes with my Arabic speakers, they're just not used to this kind of synthesis, and I've got to push it in there. It's not necessarily part of the curriculum note taking, but I've got to help them to be able to navigate through that so that they're not wasting their energy, trying to write everything down.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's definitely a tendency to want to like try and take down every single word, right? So that's
Mhm.
tricky for sure. So I think we can connect that to my next one, which was not following up on completed work. So it's like they take these notes and they're like, oh, what did I get right, or what did I understand or not understand? But this one is teachers give so much feedback, right? We probably too much, for sure, guilty
Mhm.
of overdoing too much feedback. I'm definitely guilty of that, but the student, all these studies show that like students don't really look at it, and the more
Overwhelming.
feedback there is, the less likely they are to spend any time looking at it. And so students need to find a way to ensure that they're actually looking at them and applying them to their future work, right? And so some students do, or some teachers set up things like you know uh logs on, like, okay, you're going to take notes on the feedback and you're going to say what are the three things that you notice, the biggest keys that you notice, and you're going to keep those notes, and then on your next assignment you're going to show me how you made the changes from the previous assignment. It's not even the same assignment, but how you applied the feedback from that assignment to this one. So you're going to write me a paragraph, or you're going to write about these three different things or something like that. So things, ways to encourage students to understand that the feedback is there for their benefit. And in fact, this all studies also show that feedback, and the faster the feedback is the best way for students to make improvements on their work, right? And so when they're skipping that whole part, they're missing a huge chunk of their education. And so I think that is if they're not following up on their completed work, if they're like, okay, I did that assignment, now it's done, I'm not going to think about it anymore, it's like that is probably one of the worst approaches you can take to everything, because that final chunk is where it all kind of locks in place, right? Or helps you make the big moves forward. So I think we also as teachers need to help students find ways to recognize and to ensure that they're finishing. And one thing I've always wanted to show with this, with with Canvas is, or with an LMS, any kind of
Mhm.
LMS system, is like, how about the system locks and doesn't give a grade, doesn't actually give the grade until the student shows that they've gone back in and done the reflection piece on an assignment or something like that. Like that would be
Mhm.
huge,
Mhm.
and it would take way bigger steps towards their learning than a lot of the small things that Canvas does and makes all this effort for. So I
I'm
haven't
just
seen that, but I love it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking we didn't actually include giving too much feedback as a scary teacher practice, because that's scary teacher practice. And now I'm thinking, what if your LMS only allows you to give per paragraph 3 suggestions, and then it locks and you're not allowed to give more?
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, I love that.
Dangerous line. Fine line here. Okay, so the next scary student practice or student habit is students trying to use, in the thinking that they're going to learn better and remember better, they try to use every GRE or SAT or AWL word from a
Mm,
list, without really understanding the context in which they're normally used. And we've talked about idioms in this case,
mm-hmm.
but it's going to result in really awkward or unnatural phrasing. And then they get used to it. And then they think, no, but I've seen it. It's on my list. It's a vocabulary. This is what my translator says. But more helping the student to check for context on their own with tools such as Youglish or Skell, Coca, for example, or Play Phrase Me, where they're able to type it in and then now see it in different contexts and identify which one comes up the most often. So, which one do you think they're more likely to expect you to use? Obviously, if it's a GRE word, you're going to get maybe lectures, maybe speeches, maybe very technical type examples. So,
What's Skell? I haven't heard of that one.
Skill? I thought you shared skill with me.
Did I?
If it wasn't you, then I don't know because skill is it's a search engine. You type in a word and then you get several examples in different contexts. So it's almost like a Coca version. Let me see.
Okay, so
Um,
it's kind of like a simplified version
yeah,
of a
it's more of a student
corpus.
friendly. I guess if you know Coca, yeah, corpus is a little bit more intimidating.
Mm,
But you get all of these. I forgot. I don't think you can choose the corpus, but it takes everything that's out there in text, and then it'll give you several examples,
I
and you
like
can
that.
see where the word placing is, etc., and then what type of text it's giving you,
Well, I'm
and then
looking at it
how
right
often
now.
it comes up.
It's super simple, right? So that
Yeah,
again,
very
the
simple.
corpus, many of the like Coca is just so complicated for to start
It's just
stepping into.
intimidating. You've got to be a word
Yeah,
geek,
word
and
person.
but you can look at collocations and a thesaurus once you type something in, and so it's a kind of a good tool to have up your sleeve, if you're not gonna use Youglish or Play Phrase Me.
Nice. Okay. Okay, so next one is I think this is a more of a recent bad habit, but it's a
Yes,
recent scary one is just
I started noticing. I've started noticing it, just like in the days of Wikipedia.
yeah, over trusting what ChatGPT or any of these programs say is a fact, right? So this idea, it's like we have to teach the students that everything has to be verified and traced
Right.
back to some original source.
Some legitimate source too.
Yeah, legitimate source, right? So we have to, this is all digital literacy, but like the students,
Right.
the real scary habit here is that the students don't have digital literacy to understand these
Mhm.
things. And I think one of the big things, I was actually talking to a colleague of mine earlier today, and she's like, the problem, one of the problems that people don't seem to understand is that whether or not it knows the answer to what you're asking, it's going to give you an answer, right? So when you talk
Mhm.
to a
Right.
person, they'll like I don't
It's like,
know,
I'm
or
sorry, I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. But no matter what, these programs like the AI chatbots are going to
Mhm.
give you an answer, right? And we've talked about this, like this confidence, this idea that they respond in a way that's so confident that it feels like it must be true, right?
And it's
And
phrased a certain way, right? Especially, it's not gonna give you unless you ask to explain like a 5 year old.
mm-hmm,
But I was just talking to one of my students. He's got little kids, but we were talking about AI, and he said I was just watching a video where I it showed two political figures shaking hands, and it was fake, and I could not tell that it was fake.
mm-hmm.
That so how am I supposed to teach my kids to look for stuff that's falsified? And so we just sort of we have to realize that this is it. We have to be cautious about it.
We're gonna have to be
Mm-hmm.
vigilant, really. I mean,
They're
it's
very
it's
vigilant.
it's a lot, and it's a big demand of people too, because it's hard to kind of go every single thing that you
Mm-hmm.
see. Don't you can't trust it, like, unless you see it with your own eyes in front of you. It's like
Right.
wild. So yeah,
And then
absolutely.
also the fact that once you find something, someone might share it inadvertently or without fact checking, and that's it. You've
Hmm.
now spread misinformation.
Yeah.
So, all
um
right. Well, I was talking earlier about taking notes on everything, but I've also had students who have resorted to just thinking that they can record lectures, just the straight lecture. And I've had students who have very, fancy transcription programs now. So they're thinking, okay, now I'm going to listen again and I'm going to get better because I'm going to have everything that the teacher said in addition to my notes. But again, what the step they're missing is being able to synthesize immediately after they've received that input,
Mm-hmm.
um, either by practicing note taking skills, whether it's digital or other, or by talking to someone about it or asking questions or in a study group. But then students, what ends up happening is that they become overwhelmed because they realize that listening again is great for listening practice, but it is not time efficient. So
Mm-hmm.
then they set themselves up for failure.
Yeah.
So it's almost
Well,
like a
Well, it's not only a crutch. I think it's a problem because they go, oh well, I don't have to pay as much attention right now because
yes.
I'll be able to catch up with it
Mhm.
later. And it's like, well, when's that later
Mhm.
going to be? Now is the time to be doing it, right? So,
Right. Mhm.
and I've been guilty of that in the past too. I was like, oh, I'll kind of pay attention and I'll figure out a time to do a little bit more focus later. And it's like, no, now,
Yeah.
right
And
now.
that's it because it takes the practice that your brain is doing at that moment.
Hmm.
That's where you're getting the value. That's where it's going to stick later because you practice at that moment.
Okay.
Anyway.
Um, So, the 13th scary habit.
Oh my
And
gosh.
this one is long in the making, but it's not taking personal responsibility for your learning. Um
Oh, that's creepy and scary.
yeah, so I had a student I think it was last semester, and she came up to me and she kept saying things like, Brent, I don't like the other teachers organize Canvas in a different way, and I cannot follow along with what you've got going and what you're doing in the Canvas. And and she kept saying these different things, and she wasn't doing great in the class, and like she was struggling with a lot of different parts. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, she was putting this on me as though it was my responsibility. And I said, well, I'm happy to make adjustments, but the rest of the class is doing fine. And this organization is linear. So it's just like this week we're doing
Mm-hmm.
these, just go right through them. All you have to do. And so anyways, but the problem was that she was, basically saying like the responsibility of all of the learning and whatever else is coming is the teacher's responsibility. But the truth is, of course, that the student has to do the work, right? Like
Right.
the teachers can do a lot to facilitate it, to make things happen, to make things easier, and we should always be focusing on those things. But I think that even more recently, there's been a big shift in thinking from students that like everything has to be done for them so that they can go through the slides smoothly, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like, and if it's not set up totally perfectly for them, then it's not their fault, and it's someone else's fault for not building it in the right way or whatever else that is. And I think the big thing that students need to learn is like, you're never going to live in a world where things are perfectly set up for you. You need to be able to navigate the changes and say, hey, this person does it this way, that person does it that way. If I'm going to get the most out of it, then I need to be able to make adjustments for those things.
Right. We're not cookie cutter. Teachers may have been using shells set up for them of a course, but that doesn't mean every school, every university, and then transitioning to the workplace or any projects that it's going to work that way. In fact, the ability to deal with those unpredictabilities is a great skill to have.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes from knowing that you are not a disorganized person. So I understand.
Yeah, well, I think the other part to this too that can really be a big help, and a mind shift that I took when I finally kind of said this class is not working, like I don't get anything out of it, and then I was like, well, let me readjust my thinking to this and say it's not like what can I learn even though the class isn't doing this right? What can I learn out of that, right? Like
Yeah.
what am I reflecting on the problems with what I'm doing, and then say, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. So what do I think about that? And then
Mm-hmm.
it's slightly off topic from whatever the focus is, but I'm still understanding something and go, well, that wasn't explained well. Let me see if I can find another way to get an explanation or to figure out how to talk about it or whatever it is, right? And so,
Well, I mean, regardless of, there's always going to be something that's the necessary evil that you have to overcome, whether it's a course that you're not interested in, whether it's teaching an basic electricity course, or any kind of task that you didn't choose for yourself, right? But you've got skills beyond that can
Yeah.
help you get through it and get something out of it. And that's the thing. And I remind my students, because every once in a while they'll say, I don't know why I'm taking this class. I don't know why they make us take this class. We don't need it. I don't need it. It's useless. It's like, holy moly. Chill out. I'm going to show you how.
Yeah,
It might
yeah,
not be in the way you think, but I'm not a cookie cutter teacher either. So,
yeah. So we do need to kind of get a little bit of that back. So students take the responsibility for their own
yeah,
learning. And that's it.
until Elon
13.
Musk implants those Neuralink things in
Oh
their
my
brains,
God.
and then we could just boost up the learning.
Yep. Just plug that USB stick right into your forehead. It'll be great. Uh all right.
That
So
was scary.
so that was scary. Woo.
All right, it is time for our fun finds. And this time I have Monster Hunter Now app. Uh,
What's that?
it is the Monster Hunter series, the mobile version, which is very similar to. Oh, so wait, I
I
should
don't
have started with it's a game.
Okay, yeah, I don't know.
It's a game, and
It's a game.
you
Oh, okay.
you find these scary looking dragons and monsters, and you hunt them, and you collect armor, and it's just a lot of fun. You can play with your friends, but
Oh,
the monster,
I saw this
yep,
commercial in Japan. Okay.
Moham,
Are,
MH now.
do you
There's
so,
several of them.
so just to clarify with this game, is this something that is it kind of like a Pokemon Go type of thing? Do you actually go out and
Yes.
play it, or do you just play
You
it
go
sitting?
No, you go out and play it, and it's geotagged, so uh different habitat monsters can be found in different locations, and
Okay.
you can't. I think they're trying to get. There's a huge following for Monster Hunter, so they expected tons of people to be out there hunting monsters, sort of in the same way that Pokemon Go attracted so many fans,
Okay.
and
Okay.
they have gotten a lot of people out there. And the game's not developed enough, but it's so cool. So if anybody out there is playing Monster Hunter now, find me
Is
so that I
is
can
there a way to
share.
connect to you?
Yes, I'll put my QR code on the show notes so you can
Okay.
add me as a friend.
I
We can
might
hunt
try
together.
this. This might be good for like motivating me to go on some more walks and
Oh,
something like
yeah,
that
it's
too. So,
fun. And the
okay.
sound of slashing, appropriate for this
Yeah.
episode.
I mean, I did have a problem with the Pokemon thing because it was like people were so like just in their phones walking around all the time that it's like
Staring at a wall trying to
yeah,
catch
look
something.
up, like look at the world around you. Like there's so anyways, but that being said, maybe if I dedicate myself to light play on occasion,
Yeah,
it might be good. So okay.
it's not as involved as Pokemon, but it's fun.
All right. Well, I guess this is a Halloween monster themed one. So
Ooh,
my fun find is well,
ooh,
it's not really a find. I mean, I'm making it, but I'm doing Godzillaween. So
ooh. So first you found New York, and now you've created Godzillaween. So
yes.
Godzillaween has to become a thing or a hashtag, man.
Yeah, so well, I'll be sharing on it. So basically, there is a monthly, or sorry, every October there's been this hashtag out there. It's like 31 nights of Halloween, and so you watch a different horror
Yes.
movie based on a
That's
theme. And I've done
how
this
you
for
found
several
out about
years.
shrunken heads.
Yes, right. That's right. Oh my God, shrunken heads. Okay, so anyways, I've done this for many years and just like I follow the themes and then sometimes I'm like, no, I'm gonna make like a little bit, I'm gonna adjust it to my own themes or things that I want to do. And so this year I thought, I'm in Japan, maybe I'll just and I could do like straight up super scary like Japanese movies, but I was like, you know what, let's go with Godzilla. And I'm just gonna do every Godzilla movie. So there's like
Are there
33
31?
Godzilla.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so I'm like, well, I can get one for pretty much one every day. A little bit, I might have to do one or two on extra ones. And then I went on to, I think Variety has a ranking of like the worst to the best one. So I think I'm going to start off with the worst one, which is like all monsters attack, and it's like these terrible
All the
things, and then
kaiju. Yeah.
yeah, and then working its way up. And then at the end, with a good thing for the timing here, in Japan, I think on November 1st or November 2nd, so just after the brand new Godzilla movie comes out in the theaters, which is Godzilla -1 or something like that. And it's a historical, like it's a just post-war story of like Godzilla erupting and everything. So I'm doing a Godzillaween, and if anybody wants to watch all the Godzilla movies in October together with me, you are welcome to join it.
Very cool. I can't wait. All right, guys, we are on YouTube. Share the show, buy us a coffee, support us through Patreon, leave a review, or give us a shout out. You could win a one of a kind diesel pin. We are on all the platforms, so be sure to tag us.
Almost all the platforms. The show notes
Mostly
are, yeah,
98% of the
nine,
platforms,
yeah, there's one that we're
of the
not on.
better
So
named platforms.
show notes are available at diesel.org/91, and we're also available to listen on at Voice Ed Canada. That's voiced.ca. You can find us on Instagram and YouTube at DieselPod, and I am on many of the socials at Brent G. Warner.
And I am on many of the socials at IXY_Pixie. That's IXY_PIXY.
In Maori, thank you is Tenakoto. So sorry to the Maori
That scared
speakers.
me.
Yeah. Tenakoto for tuning in to the Diesel podcast.
Boo.
Whoa.